Hi science students, thanks for checking out my inheritance overview screencasts. Please use this as a tool. This is not only a tool, a means to introduce the new terms to you, but also as a way to practice. This would be a great study tool if you're getting ready for a quiz. Some of the things that we're going to go over in this screencast, I'd like to introduce you to a couple of vocabulary terms, specifically the words genotype, phenotype, dominant, and recessive, all of which apply to the inherited traits possessed by these three nice-looking gentlemen, me, my dad, and my brother. Something else that I'm going to talk about very generally is how reproductive cells form. I'm not going to go into a whole lot of detail. It's not necessary for us to do that, but I am going to emphasize that the amount of chromosomes that are in a normal body cell are divided in half for every reproductive cell that forms. And then lastly, I'm going to introduce you to a tool that geneticists use. Geneticists, if they know the genes possessed by a mother and a father, they can calculate a percentage or a likelihood that certain genes will be possessed by their offspring. And these little boxes represent possible offspring that could be formed in this particular cross, genetic cross. So let's take a few steps back. This looks similar to a worksheet that you received very recently. We learned that all living things are made of cells, and we know that cells usually have a nucleus. Not all cells do, but most do. And then inside of that nucleus is the genetic information that determines our inherited traits. This genetic information is in the chromosome form, that nice compact portable bundle. We use an analogy as a suitcase, and if we unravel this chromosome, you would see these very elongated double helix structures. You've probably seen or heard of this before. It's known as deoxyribonucleic acid, or just DNA. So this long strand is a DNA strand. You might know that these are called nitrogenous bases, these different combinations of letters. And what I'm going to really emphasize today is that your DNA is made of sections, and these sections are called genes. And these genes determine our inherited traits, and they're all found inside of that bundled chromosome structure. So let's take a look at a picture of you. Here you are. It looks just like you, of course, right? Your genotype, the term genotype, refers to your inherited genes. What genes did you inherit from your mom? What genes did you inherit from your dad? And in case you didn't know, you have exactly half of mom's genetic information, half of dad's genetic information. Even though you might look more like one or the other parent, your physical traits or your phenotype might resemble, maybe you look a little more like your dad or a little bit more like your mom. Your genotype is exactly half and half. You have received half of your chromosomes, again, from your mom, represented by pink, and half of the chromosomes from your father, represented by blue. Some other terms, geneticists don't refer to genes as the brown hair gene or the blonde hair gene. It's too complicated. They use a shorthand, a system of letters, and we know call these alleles. So alleles are letters that represent different genes that we're looking at. If the letter is capital, that means it's dominant. It's a stronger allele. Some dominant traits, or some traits that are determined by dominant alleles, would be like brown eye color or dark hair color. These are dominant traits. If the letter is lowercase, we call this a recessive allele. So this lowercase b would code for a recessive trait. Recessive traits might include light-eyed color or blue eye color. Okay, so just talking very generally, we've learned about meiosis, when one cell divides exactly in half and it produces two daughter cells that are identical. And when mitosis takes place, an organism is growing, or it might be repairing itself, or replenishing dead cells like skin cells. I'm going to very generally talk about this word meiosis, which is similar. This picture kind of captures what happens in meiosis in a vague way. Meiosis is when one body cell divides not once, but it divides again. So we have, instead of two daughter cells, there are four daughter cells. We refer to these daughter cells as reproductive cells. For animals, they would be sperm or egg cells. I'm going to use the word gametes. Gametes mean reproductive cells for animals. They also represent reproductive cells for plants. So that term gamete is very applicable and a lot more convenient to use. So I might use that term. So like we said, or as you've seen in that dice activity, healthy human beings have 46 chromosomes in their normal body cells. And when meiosis takes place, when the reproductive or the gametes are formed, each individual gamete is going to have exactly half of this chromosome number, half of the genetic information that the parent cell had. It's dividing in half. These are the chromosome numbers for the gametes. So let's take a look at two individuals with very unique phenotypes. This woman has brown hair, and we're looking up here at her chromosomes, her genetic information. She has one capital dominant allele, big B, and she has a lowercase b, which is a recessive allele. This person's phenotype is brown hair. Why is her hair brown? Because she has a dominant allele. One dominant gene overpowers the recessive gene, so that's why her phenotype is expressed as the dominant phenotype. She has brown hair. This gentleman is expressing a recessive phenotype. He has two recessive alleles, or homozygous recessive alleles. So here's his genetic information. Those two lowercase b's, there is no presence of a dominant trait, so that means that he will express the recessive phenotype. So we have genotype, phenotype. Genotype, lowercase b, phenotype, blonde hair color. If these two people had a child, would their children have blonde hair or will their children have brown hair? And the way that we could determine that is using the tool I mentioned before. It's called a Punnett Square. It looks like a window with 4 little brackets there. But this is going to be a great assistance to us as we try and calculate what the phenotypes of this couple's children will be. So how do you set up a Punnett Square? Well, it's very easy. First, you're going to take one parent's genotype. Let's focus on the father first. Remember, dad's genotype is lowercase b, two recessive alleles. We take one of those recessive alleles. This is a gamete. This is one of his reproductive cells. We're going to line it up with the first window to the left. We're going to take the second recessive allele. We're going to move it down here and set it up next to the bottom window. That's step one. Step two, you're going to take the second parent's genotype. Remember, mom's genotype is capital B, that's dominant, and one lowercase b, that will be recessive. So let's take one of those gametes, let's put it here. Let's take the other gamete and also put it above like this. Okay, so we have dad's genetic information that he will give to his offspring, and mom's genetic information that she will give to her offspring. Okay, step 3 is we distribute the alleles. Each of these boxes represents one manner in which an egg cell can be fertilized by a sperm cell. In other words, how the gametes can combine. And if you know how to do lattice math, this is going to look very familiar to you. What I like to do is I like to start with the top and I like to bring the letters down. So I'm going to take this dominant allele and I'm moving it down this way. And I'm writing that capital letter. I'm going to drag that capital letter down to the second box. And now I'm out of room. So I'm done distributing this allele. Now I take my second allele possessed by the mother, bring that down, lowercase b, and I'm going to bring that lowercase b down again, like so. Great. So these are the ways in which mom's egg cells, mom's gametes, can be distributed to her children. Her children might inherit dominant or they might inherit recessive. Now the father's gametes. Let's take the father's gametes and go from left to right. Big B, little b, and I'm going to continue that pathway like so. Okay, this is all done. Now I'm ready to distribute the gametes on the bottom half, and I'm just bringing that lowercase b from left to right. Now my Punnett Square is done. I have no idea what this means, but if I go to this next page, this gives me a bit of a guide to interpreting the Punnett Square information that I've just distributed. Remember, each square represents a possible baby, a likelihood. If the baby has inherited 2 dominant traits, that baby will be homozygous dominant. Let's see how often that occurs. That doesn't occur at all. There are no homozygous dominant children that can be born of this couple. But if the child did have capital B, 2 homozygous dominant genes, then the phenotype of the child will be brown hair. If the child receives a capital and a lowercase b, that child will also have brown hair. Oh, and that happens 2 places here. Why does a child have brown hair if there's a capital and a lowercase b? It's because of the presence of a dominant gene. The dominant gene overpowers the recessive. If the child receives 2 recessive genes, 2 recessive alleles, that child will have blonde hair. And we can see that 50% of the children in this cross have homozygous recessive genotypes. So 50% of the babies will be blonde from this couple, and 50% of these babies will have brown hair from this couple. Okay, so just a very general summary. Thanks for bearing with me. I know there's a lot of terms, but 3 words that I want you to definitely come away feeling more comfortable with is genotype, the genes, and those genes are represented with letters, and we call those capital or lowercase letters alleles. Capital means dominant, lowercase recessive, and then the phenotype means the physical trait. And the Speaker of the House, Paul Ryan, has a well-known physical trait or phenotype called a widow's peak represented there. Okay, thanks for watching, and I hope you do a good job in filling out your Google form.